Did you grow up evangelical? Wondering where are you getting this information? You mean specifically about evangelical parenting in the US? I was a member of the Presbyterian Church in America for many years. Are you familiar with Abraham Piper? If not, I really recommend you check him out. His dad, John Piper, came to speak at the seminary that my husband attended. My husband has a master's in theology from Covenant Seminary, and let's just put it this way, there are presbyteries within the PCA that will not ordain you unless you believe in a literal 6-day creation. We're also an unschooling family that was active in an evangelical homeschool group for many, many years. And I got to watch other people parent in a way that I would never in a million years parent my kids. We also spent some years living on the Central Oregon coast in a homeschooling community that was predominantly IBLP, aka the Gothardites. That's the cult that the Duggars belong to. So I'm getting this information from firsthand lived experience, even though I refuse to raise my children that way. Wow, I guess I'm just realizing that Presbyterian is evangelical. I only knew a few from Scottish stereotypes. Yeah, I think for folks outside of the Reformed tradition, most people are not aware that there are very, very different branches of Presbyterianism. I think most Americans, when they envision Presbyterians, they think of the Presbyterian Church USA. They think of a liberal denomination a lot like the UCC or maybe even like Unitarians. And while the PCUSA does have a lot of very liberal denominations and they do ordain women, there's still a lot of diversity within the PCUSA itself. Some churches are more liberal than others. I grew up in the PCUSA, but I remember our pastor was horrified that one year at the presbytery level, there was another church advocating to pray our Mother, Father, God who art in heaven instead of our Father who art in heaven. And he was like, this is heretical, this is horrible. And there was a lot of drama. But in general, I think there is this cultural understanding that Presbyterians are very liberal, but that's just the PCUSA, and that's not even all PCUSA churches. Presbyterians are part of a Reformed tradition. We're Calvinists. I shouldn't say we. I'm not a Presbyterian anymore. Right, there's the 5 points of Calvinism: tulip, total depravity, unmerited favor, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and perseverance of the saints. But there's also the governmental structure of the Presbyterian Church. Right, our representative democracy very much takes from the Presbyterian model of the church is governed by a board of elected elders. There's also a diaconate that serves the needs of the congregation and the community. So in the Presbyterian Church, there's the teaching elders and the ruling elders. They're elected by the congregation, and together they form what's called the session. And the regional governing body over that is called the presbytery, and they oversee a group of churches. And above that is the synod, and above that is the General Assembly. So it's the governing structure that makes us all Presbyterian, as well as the Reformed/Calvinist perspective. But I think a lot of people are not aware of the fact that there are really, really conservative Presbyterian denominations. After I was raised in the PCUSA, for much of my adulthood, I was part of the PCA, Presbyterian Church in America. They don't ordain women. And some PCA churches practice what's called federal headship. That's a really popular thing in conservative evangelical America, where not only are women not allowed to be in leadership, but they can't even do things like take communion without their husband or their dad being next to them as their authority figure. If you want to know how my husband and I were part of this denomination for so long, we kind of went to churches that were considered the black sheep of the denomination. The church we went to in St. Louis, they had women on the diaconate. They were like really rebellious. We got involved with a church that's mission was what was at the time called Racial Reconciliation. It was a ministry to the Inner City Church of St. Louis, New City Fellowship. It was a really wonderful community. Kind of taught me how a church should work. And I really realized that other PCA churches were different from them. It took me a while to understand how a lot of PCA churches fit the definition fundamentalist. But they aren't even the most conservative part of the Presbyterian Church. There's also Orthodox Presbyterians. I mean, there were plenty of people in our PCA church here in Portland who thought that some of the things we were doing were like too liberal. And so they left for the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. So I would definitely put the PCA and the OPC into the fundamentalist and or evangelical community of Christian churches. They are a whole different entity than the PCUSA, despite them all having the same governing structure of an elected council of elders and despite them all being part of the Reformed tradition.